Just a small context before we begin. The lockdown is over almost, and all the smaller ones are still occurring in spurts, around the country to check the pandemic. But if we think about it, there were quite some unbelievable scenes of empty roads and everything shut, for almost 2 full months. And they were quite an eyesore. And possibly the only oasis in that desert was the friendly neighborhood Kirana store, right? It was our succor, it was our lifeline to food and to sanity and other things that we need. In turn, the lifeline for these saviors, they were the consumer product companies, right? Some of who you see on our panel today. And despite severe challenges, these companies managed their businesses deftly and they ensured the supply of essentials to the country.
The quarter one results, which have been pouring in for some time now, highlight the resilience of consumer goods companies in the face of these great challenges. Most companies have seen traction, as we were just talking about them, also for their health, hygiene, and nutrition product lines. And interestingly, even jewelry demand has not crashed despite soaring prices, perhaps because gold is so much associated and with the culture in India and has a social significance here. Overall, consumer goods industry's revenues and profits have improved in June, July, despite local lockdowns that continue to create uncertainty. There's also hope as analysts observe return of some discretionary demand. So it's been 5 months into this COVID-19 crisis. What do you think has been the biggest disruption in your company? And what are the biggest lessons that you take away from that disruption?
Yeah, I would believe that from our perspective and our business perspective, there were two major disruptions. One is we have a very distributed supply chain. I mean, we are possibly one of the most spread out supply chain in the country, almost like an oil company. We have 60 plants servicing literally in every state of India. That was one thing which really went down when shutdown happened. It was a disruption. We are not planned for a situation where all plants get shut down. I think the second big thing for us was more the way our business is structured. I think our business is structured to do most of it during the summer, and number two, on away from home outlets. Both these were the most impacted. One was the period was impacted, and second was the away from home outlets really shut down. And this was possibly something we never anticipated, that there would be 100% shutdown in the peak period with all the supply chain also. It was sort of, in my view, the most unexpected happening of
So you know what, if I were to chip into what Mr.
Sure.
Krishna Kumar mentioned, the seasonality aspect of even for us in April, we have Akshay Tritiya, which is a very large jewelry and gold buying festival. And typically we are also start of the year with a launch of a new collection, etc. So very interestingly, we had a host of products and inventory build up and new collections lined up to be launched in April, and then in May again, there's a wedding season in May and June. So that entire piece, I think the whole lockdown created a short-term disruptive impact, which of course is restricted for the first quarter for us. But nevertheless, that is just something to chip into what seasonality he said as well.
So one of the things actually, like KK said, I think in-home consumption has been a big challenge. And hence, building, sorry, rather in-home consumption has been good, but out-of-home consumption has been a huge challenge. And hence, one of the things that we have done just in the last 2 months is to launch cakes, which is a lot more in-home consumption to balance the portfolio that we have, where there's a lot of out and about impulse consumption for chocolates, for example, right? We are just test launching Bonvita Fills, which is a center-filled cereals in 2 states. We just did that 3 weeks ago. So I think some intentional actions to see how we can balance the portfolio between in-home and out-of-home consumptions. I think building on what Mr. Kumar said. The other thing that's happened to all of us is, our license to operate got questioned. And therein lies a huge learning. And I think, the whole thing about saying then managing this from the headquarters was not feasible. You had to get license to operate from 700 plus district magistrate and police commissioners, correct? And hence, how do you build local empowerment? How do you transfer the capability of license to operate in the hands of the frontline sales team who have never done this in conventional FMCG companies, right? It's typically the factories and the government affairs department who do this at the headquarters. That has been a big, big revelation and possibly one of the biggest learnings going forward.
Rajat, maybe you can tell us a little bit about, it's one thing to say that this is what companies should do and this is what consumers are saying, and it's another thing to do it, right? Do you see in general, and I'm not talking specifically of the companies here in the panel today, but the industry in general, do you see them adapting properly and well overall to the pandemic? Have they got a good understanding of what to do in future if such a thing happens again?
Look, it's a journey. Obviously, I think things will evolve. Initially, when the whole pandemic started, the view was it will get over in 1 or 2 months. At that time, I remember there were a lot of projections that were given, which were, that this will end in 3 months. And I think somebody made a point at the start that basically it's impossible to predict, when this whole thing will end. So I think if you see the last 3 to 5 months, I would say the consumer goods companies have done, I would say, well to adapt. I think going forward, really, since we're discussing at a consumer level, I think we see primarily 2 mega trends, which would be interesting to, to the extent what consumer goods companies respond. Some of them have responded, some of them are responding. One, I think, which is also being mentioned by several of the panelists, what we call as decade of home. So, are we really entering the decade of home? And therefore, should our entire, product portfolio, the customer interactions, how should that be pivoted towards, that particular mega trend? The second mega trend that we feel is really, at this point is every business is a health business. So, while previously, there was clear thing, and this goes beyond just consumer goods. So even, if you're going to a hotel, even if you are, watching a movie, maybe in some distant future. So every business is becoming a health business. So these trends, if you like, are really impacting, I would say a lot of ways in which consumer goods companies, I think JK mentioned, everybody mentioned, the focus on trying to, balance the portfolio within home and out home. And I guess, as I said, this is really work in progress. As Anurag said, there will be winners and losers. Things are still evolving, but I think if, I think really what we feel is on these 2 trends, if the companies can sort of focus a bit more going forward, I think that is something which you have to watch out for.
But I think dairy business largely being in very short shelf life categories, we are in a very extreme industry where you have to tailor your demand to the daily, tailor your supply to the daily demand. So it has to change every day. And that in itself is something which the dairy business is always used to. So we are relatively quick to adapt to demand changes. However, the point being made, with the disruption in HoReCa, hotels, restaurant, caterer segment, offices segment, eating out, leisure consumption, that clearly has thrown all projections out of gear. And I think Deepak and Mr. Krishna Kumar and Mr. Deepak mentioned that in-home consumption has gone up. So for us also, we find convenience foods going up. So ready to eat, ready to cook is going up. Things which are easier to cook, paneer for example has gone up, ghee sale has gone up. But ice creams, beverages, buttermilk, lassi has really dropped very sharply. So these are different trends which are playing out differently in different industries.
Real-time analytics and investment in digital seem to be the two most important threads of conversation. You think that is what that should be more pronounced in organizations when their investments are concerned?
In fact, we are implementing this across a few CPG companies where you can actually forecast at a distributor SKU level, outlet SKU level, what's the sales in this month is going to be. That requires a machine learning algorithm that's learning all the time. So clearly, I think there is significant complexity that CPG industry has. They're dealing with millions of consumers with multiple transactions through the year. The frequency of purchase is not once in 5 years, it's like 10, 15, 20 times in a year, and with millions of consumers. But clearly, I think technology can play a big role. Like Rajat said, it's already, this digital and analytics was already a trend pre-COVID. The need for it has only accelerated, given the uncertainty that we're seeing now in our
Consumers are changing, consumers are more net savvy, decision making is moving south in terms of age. Even the pre-teens are now influencing parents in terms of decision, and it is not only about the decisions to buy major stuff, but also what food you're going to keep at home, what they want to eat, what they don't want to eat, what watch they want to buy. Yeah, the earrings that most boys sport these days, even the boys, right? I would never imagine that. But the point is that the consumer has been changing for some time, and the internet and technology, more awareness, more exposure, has made the consumer remarkably different from what he or she was, about 5 years ago. Now with the pandemic, everybody is at home, everybody is on the phone, everybody is on the computer, on the iPad, right? Everybody is on the net all the time, right? And all buying decisions are on the net, driven by that, driven by youngsters. What happens to consumer loyalty in this kind of scenario? What happens to brand positioning? Is the product more important than the message? Is brand loyalty more important than sales? Just opportunistically taking a thing from the market and saying, okay, this thing is selling more, let me just make a product and put it out there, right? What is your approach to the consumer today?
I'm picking up a little bit from what Rajat shared earlier and what you asked. I think the first step that we had to take was to build a certain amount of customer confidence. So we anyway are an N equal to 1 business, in the sense we have to sell a product to an individual, it's a higher ticket value through retail stores. So we had the benefit of that piece. And in fact, during the months of April, we did about 500,000, what we call internally as empathy calls, just inquiring after our customers and saying, hope you're doing fine, do you need any help? And if some of them had a milestone like a birthday or an anniversary, we were able to wish them, also ask after them. We were not selling them anything. Some of them had golden harvest accounts which were maturing. So we needed to tell them, do you want a refund? Do you want to hold on to it? Do you want to continue? So there were some natural conversations as well there. But this happened by the army on the ground, and it was phenomenal work while work from home. The second layer of response that we found, in fact, we are a trusted brand, and coming from Tata and Titan in a largely unorganized space, we had the benefit. But I think people would anyway expect us to do the right thing and do it to a very high safety quotient. So we wanted to push ourselves to say, can we be the gold standard in safety? And how do we, picking up from this whole bit about every business is a health business, and why should I come out and buy, and what will give me the confidence that your store is safe? So we actually went on a very hyper drive, and it's an ongoing journey. Every day we are adding layers and layers of new thoughts in making it safer. So we said the safest stores in town and the safest workplaces, of course, but safest stores in town from a customer perspective. And that really a lot of people, we were surprised. We were doing the right thing, but a lot of people came back and told us, this, we didn't feel safe in other stores. We didn't feel as safe at home. And therefore we are in the last few months realized it's become a competitive advantage. We were not expecting it, but that's an outcome. Okay. So I would like to say actually brand loyalty has got amped and multiplied during this period. Trust factor has gone up even more, at least for the category we are in. People are saying, I would rather go to somebody whom I know and who's trustworthy. Maybe it's the nature of the business or the retail service experience that is required. The third thing that we've been ramping up very quickly is this whole at home purchase. So, and I know we will talk about digital, but essentially going digital, even video calling, even reaching out to home, try at home, minimizing the time they need to spend in the store, if at all they need to come to the store to do the final check, before they buy a 100,000 rupee product or a 2 lakh rupee product, or, a larger set sometimes. And the fourth dimension, which I would like to say, is that we have been doing a lot of work as a brand in terms of karigars, wholesomeness, authenticity of material, sourcing from responsible sourcing of gold from the right mines, LBMA, or even diamonds from the right kind of site holders, not blood diamonds, not, so there's a lot of work that goes on anyway in the background as an organized, responsible player. But we found that customers and purposeful and wholesome brands, the research that we found and what we heard, the many voices saying, I don't mind consuming, but I think companies need to take up their responsibility much more seriously. It was already happening. It's not something new. I think millennials and a lot of younger people saying, don't damage the planet. Government can't do everything. But during this period, even the purposefulness and purposeful consumption from wholesome brands is a plank which is emerging. It is not yet emerged. I would say it depends on how independent players or marketers can actually leverage it in an authentic manner. It's a very tricky one to do. You can't just go out and say, Rara, I'm doing all this. Right. You need to do all that stuff and also tell the story in a meaningful, not kind of a chest thumping kind of way. It has to be very subtle. So to us, brand positioning is about right now being authentic, as authentic as we can be, but also in a nice way telling the story and keeping the customer at the center of what is it that is relevant for that customer. For some people it is assisted selling through video chats, and for some digitally savvy it's about, I don't mind just having a live chat with somebody who can help me out, and for some others it is, all that is fine, you just send me the stuff home, try at home. So there's a whole continuum of customers with whom you need to serve them differently and also tell them different stories. The advantage with digital is you can tell different stories to different cohorts and different segments, and sustain that in a meaningful manner. So that's the way we are looking at the way brands are kind of, at the way in which we need to kind of talk to our customer.
A pandemic which has touched everybody, but then there have been, at least in the last 4 years, there was something called a demonetization. Yeah. Which is also a very different kind of a pandemic, right? Which crippled us on a different sense. I mean, everybody had money, but nobody had cash. And how it hurt discretionary versus non-discretionary. We have had a huge regulatory change. We moved from some taxation to GST. We have had a transporter strike for 11 days. As a company, we went through a malware attack. And I think there are so, in each of these 5 years, we can name at least 1 or 2 disruptions which could have blown a hole through your business. So, I don't think we need to start now. We should have started some time back. And good companies would have known that today, I think disruptions are here to stay. I'll just quote what I heard from Kareem. Kareem was the CEO for Google in Asia Pac 2 years ago. We were there on a learning tour, and he said something very nice. He said, the slowest pace of change you'll ever see in your life is what you're seeing today. So what it meant is that if you believe this pandemic is the biggest thing you've seen in your life, it's possibly the most, it's possibly the most docile thing that you possibly will ever see coming forward, right? Now, if you have that kind of a mindset, then you will have to willy-nilly start preparing your business for this. Specifically, can you change manufacturing footprints very easily in India? Unlikely. Your factories, you can't just move a factory from one city to the other. It's linked to the people, employment, there are unions, there are exit clauses, there are authorities, there are so many things. it's not easy to put up a factory or exit one. The second one that you talked about, retail landscape, that is going through a tectonic change right now. And then maybe that's a subject of discussion completely separately. The third one is you talked about balancing your portfolio. It's huge. Today, one of the things that has saved us is our 5 rupee and 10 rupee portfolio, which for chocolates as an industry is more than 50%. And today, what we are seeing is actually a double-digit growth in this portfolio. So if you look at what's happened, so if you didn't have a balanced portfolio, which offered a premium offering like silk for festivals like Valentine, and we come back with a recent campaign saying, after all this COVID, we are meeting each other now. So there's a I miss you bar that we have come up with on our silk. So currently, or I
Very
missed you,
innovative.
that's probably the right thing to do now for that brand, because it's all about love. And so that's the premium end. And then we have the 5 rupee and 10 rupee, 5-star, Perk, Gems, Cadbury Dairy Milk. We have the 1 rupee chocolates, halls, a 2 rupee Cadbury shots. Correct? These are extremely important. And then you have the mainstream brands, which is the 20 rupee, 5-star, 20 rupee CDM. You need to have a balanced portfolio. The other imbalance that's there in our portfolio, overall we are okay because we have biscuits and Bonvita, which is in-home. Half of chocolates is in-home, something is outside. But I think we need to build back more in-home, especially on chocolates. Right. And especially with items like, cakes and Bonvita fills. Right? So I think and you can't do it overnight. I think building brands and products and portfolio take a long time. So it's a journey, but I think we are wiser for what, in hindsight, we all have 2020 vision, right? So
because people, because of the pandemic acting as a catalyst, have started really using this as an opportunity to really transact. So whether it is the consumer or even the retailer, I think you find more and more demand coming through the e-commerce space. So I think the fact was this was anticipated. It is just that it has got catalyzed during this period. Companies like us, we were preparing for this. We had our own engagement site called Coco, and now we are really looped into every single e-commerce platform. See, the idea is now every company in the FMCG space to have a clear, holistic, strategic thought process of how this channel will work and how will it work with causing least disruption to the existing channels, because India has a big brick and mortar approach to business, which employs a lot of people. So we need to really take part in it, but at the same time, very finely balance it with what we have, so that it is accretive and not completely destroys the other one. So it's going to be a tightrope walk for some time till we see how this scales up post-COVID also.
I think the first thing that came across, at least to me, was to look at how do you sort of have a more balanced portfolio, given the whole changing, consumer behaviors during this pandemic, and making the portfolio more resilient. So I guess that's something which, at least came across multiple points that everybody made. The interesting thing was that, there is a greater focus on new product launches to ensure that, and how companies have been able to do it was very interesting during this particular pandemic. So that's one key takeaway that, I had from this conversation. The second was really, obviously this pandemic, threw in huge challenges on supply chain. So how do you make for your supply chain more future ready, more resilient, maybe enable a bit more redundancy in the system, more responsive? And I think the interesting example which Ajoy gave was, how to take some of the work around artisans, etc., to where they live. I think the Project M would be very interesting to see how that one evolves. But that was the second thing, was very interesting to look at and get feedback on. I think the third really around the brand, I think it was very clear, the panel's view that, brands are for long term, and therefore one should not tinker around with their positioning. But I think what equally also came out is that maybe it's also a good time to sort of strengthen the messages around brand values, around purpose, more responsible, and those type of cues. The companies would be better served if they were to, go there. I think digital commerce, the e-commerce, I think seemed like a no-brainer, and I think everybody seems to be thinking about it. I think Raj mentioned that there could be various flavors to it, and I couldn't agree more on that particular aspect. And I think again, digital, obviously, I think everybody thinking about it, but I suppose the sense I got is that maybe everybody has their own sort of priority, but maybe there could be there could be an opportunity to look at the whole aspect of analytics and whole aspect of data, which I think everybody seems to agree with. But that's another area which sort of everybody could, maybe, and as we discussed, it is a continuous process, but people could look at even more.